In today's video, we have all the latest NHL trade talk on the Montreal Canadiens, the Vancouver Canucks, plus could veteran Joe Pavelski be on the move ahead of the deadline? We actually have a small trade of prospects between the Stars and the Lightning. We have news from the NHL waiver wire, plus we have an update from Boston, including Tuukka Rask's injury, and Patrice Bergeron will not sign an extension and likely going to become a UFA. We'll discuss all the latest news coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and rumors to discuss today. First up, I want to discuss news from the NHL waiver wire. We have news today that the Edmonton Oilers have placed defenseman Slater Koekkoek on waivers. Of course, if he clears, he can be assigned to their taxi squad or to the minor leagues. Slater Koekkoek actually had a little bit more of a role last year, but certainly has spent some time on injured reserve this year. He's put up 4 points in 19 games. Former first-round pick, spent a lot of time with the Lightning organization before eventually making his way to the Oilers. Wouldn't be completely shocked if a team did pick him up. I mean, he is a veteran of a decent amount of games now. Not a big superstar by any means. Probably was drafted a little bit higher than he should have been based on his track record now, but of course we can always say that looking back in retrospect, but at the same time, he is a decent, NHL serviceable defenseman, so teams looking for some extra added depth very well could make a claim here, but we'll find out at 2 o'clock Eastern time tomorrow to see if anything transpires. We also got word that the Chicago Blackhawks, of course, has a similar approach here to the Anaheim Ducks when it comes to finding their new general manager. Of course, the Hawks are doing something a little bit different than other teams. They are working with a third-party company called Sportology to help them determine who the new candidate is going to be, including internal candidate Kyle Davidson. But they also have a little bit of a committee, I guess you could call it, of former players that are going to be a part of this, including Eddie Olczyk, Patrick Sharp, and Marian Hossa, just like we saw with the Ducks, including guys like, Paul Kariya, etc., and Scott Niedermayer. Like, it's just nice to see some, former veteran players involved here. Obviously, they have a long history with the organization, clearly care about how things are going to go, and obviously will have a voice in that decision. There's been a lot of talk that the Hawks, based on comments from ownership at least, will not hire a president of hockey ops, but there's some NHL reporters and insiders are not completely convinced that it's going to be that way forever, just for the time being. And there's a lot of talk and speculation that Ed Olczyk, who's a part of this GM search committee, that he very well could have some sort of a role to kind of help rebuild the team's reputation and connect more with the fans, of course, after everything the franchise has been through with Kyle Beach and everything. That's certainly have a tarnished name and reputation, so they need to rebuild everything, and he could be a big part of that, as well as other alumni players who certainly would have that connection with the fans to help bring everything back up. So we'll see where things go when it comes to Chicago, but I would think that with the young a group of guys in Anaheim between the two jobs, I think it's fair to say the Ducks job is probably more appealing to some, but be interesting to see who emerges here. And there might not even be a name that we're totally familiar with, considering they're using the Sportology company. There's even some talks that people from other sporting backgrounds like baseball might even be in the mix too, but we really don't know for sure how things are going to go in that regard. Now, we do have some news I want to talk about today from the Boston Bruins. Of course, we know that Tuukka Rask is on injured reserve now. He is going to be out for a little while with injury, but certainly, his first game back was decent, but then he had a string of games where just was not good. He allowed 12 goals on 63 shots, and it just was a bit of a disaster. So right now, because of the injury, he's obviously on the sidelines for a bit. They've recalled Jeremy Swayman, and I've seen some media kind of, out there saying, is the Tuukka Rask experiment over? Or at least should it be? Should he be more used as an insurance piece and just run with Ullmark and Swayman? And I really don't think that's going to be the case. I mean, obviously, Raska's short run there, not, up to his standards, and he'll probably be the first one to admit it. I mean, he's, obviously been very upfront with media whenever he's talked since he's been signed and returned to the Bruins, and I don't think he'd have any issues admitting that his play's been subpar, but after he, gets through the injury, I'm sure the Bruins will give him every opportunity to kind of make a run with this before they decided to keep him on the sidelines as insurance. But certainly that's not the point of signing him. It wasn't the point of bringing him back. And I guess we'll see where it goes. But the Rask experiment so far in the return has not gone overly well. I mean, the other news today out of Boston I want to talk about, which is something we've touched on before, but before it was more of a rumor, where now it's more confirmed based on comments from Bergeron himself. But essentially, we got confirmation that Patrice Bergeron definitely will not sign an extension, at least not during the season, and it's likely not even going to happen until free agency hits. Based on the comments, it sounds like Patrice Bergeron, for the first time in his career, kind of wants to explore free agency and just wants to take it, a little bit slower. He's always signed the longer-term extension, hasn't really explored that. Obviously very happy in Boston, and we don't really have any reason to think that Bergeron is going to want out of Boston. Obviously, there's no word of a trade, not right now. He's going to see this season through. That's 100% certain. But as far as the future goes, we don't know. He will turn 37 years old in July. I think it's fair to say he wants to see how he feels. He wants to see, how long he wants to continue playing. That's probably an uncertainty. He wants to see where, and he mentioned a lot of other things too. So he probably wants to see the direction of the team. How does this season finish up? How do they do in the playoffs? Where's the direction of the team? Where's his body at? Family, all those things that need to be factored in, and ultimately make a decision based on that. But it looks like there's a pretty good chance, though, based on all these comments, that it's not something he even wants to really talk about, think about, or explore until we get to free agent time. Now, depending on when their season actually is officially over, between then and free agency, could something be worked out to keep him in Boston a little longer? It is possible, but we know with Bergeron, obviously he's nearing the end, but he's still playing well, right? So it's hard to imagine him hanging him up, but every player has their own right to call their shot in that regard, and we really don't know what's going through his mind right now. So we'll see at the end of the season what the future holds for him, but we're not going to get any kind of indication anytime sooner on a potential contract extension. Now, as I mentioned as well, we also have a trade to announce. Yes, we do finally have some movement, but it's nothing substantial in the least. It's a minor deal between minor league players, basically prospects that have never materialized, swapping teams for a fresh start to see if the other teams can make better use of them and find a way to get them on track here. But Dallas is trading Alexei Lipanov, who was a 2017 third-round pick, center iceman, 22 years old, played in the minors now for a few years. He's going to Tampa in exchange for Ty Fellhaber, who's also was an undrafted guy that they signed, who's also a center, 23 years old, also mostly all played. These guys haven't played at all in the NHL as of yet. Lipanov, I believe, has even split time in the East Coast League in the AHL, so certainly not a big deal at all, but a couple of prospects that these teams obviously were hoping might work out and did not, so they're going on to hopefully greener pastures where they can find a better opportunity. But probably at this point in their careers, considering where things are at, highly doubtful that either play in the NHL, but you just never know. We get late bloomers all the time, and they very well could prove that to be incorrect here. So we'll see. Also, some more injury updates as well before we get into the trade talk today. Jake Bean of the Jackets is going to be out for about 4 weeks with a groin injury, so that's certainly not good for him. Also, when it comes to the Maple Leafs, Jake Muzzin, who was, I guess they were optimistic, the Leafs were, that he would play a game or two before the All-Star break. He's out right now, kind of recover from a concussion, and it looks as though that he was at practice a bit, I believe he was, but he's going to be out longer. It seems like it wasn't quite working out. Had to take a step back in the recovery process, so he's definitely out until after the All-Star break. And with all the talk of the Maple Leafs being linked to wanting to add on the blue line ahead of the playoffs to trade deadline, I think that his health is probably concerning for sure. I mean, we've seen in the last few years he's had his fair share of injuries. He plays a very physical style of game, not afraid of the rough stuff. It's bound to happen, but at the end of the day, like last year in the playoffs, he was a key guy that got hurt, and that impacts things greatly on that back end for the Maple Leafs. And if this is a concussion issue, it could linger. You just don't know. That's the scary part, is the uncertainty, right? So you have to think that the Leafs are quite concerned at this point, but it doesn't mean they're going to rush out and make a rash decision here and do something drastic. Like right now, there's no need. We only have a little bit of time here. Then we have the All-Star break coming up. probably reevaluate in a week or two. But if it drags on more than a couple of weeks, then I would think at that point we might see Kyle Dubas go out and maybe get something done a little bit ahead of the deadline instead of waiting till they get there to see. But they have been linked to Josh Manson, as I mentioned before, but certainly no guarantee that Manson moves. But certainly, according to Friedman and Jeff Merrick, a player who's apparently very much on Toronto's radar. But again, like some of these players we're hearing, will they want to come to Canada given the stricter COVID protocols? There's a lot of talk that players are not crazy about going to Canadian teams right now because of that. Of course, their families are all settled in the U.S. and, they might not want to make that kind of commitment. It's hard to say, right? But at the same time, some of these guys that are pending UFAs, it wouldn't be for long term. Doesn't mean they would re-sign or anything like that. So it's really difficult to say exactly where things go. But certainly keep your eye on the Leafs and their blue line, and Jake Muzzin's health, I think, will certainly play a role in what they decide to do. Another key player as well is a guy who seems to be aging like fine wine is Stars forward Joe Pavelski. Likely could be traded. Now, of course, the Stars are not at a point in the season where they're ready to throw in the towel. They haven't really, decided what they are yet. But many feel, and I personally feel, they're going to end up being sellers. They have a lot of players that are pending UFAs. I don't see them getting into the playoffs. I think there's too many teams that are going to be ahead of them. At best, they'd be a wild card team. But, in the Central, you've got Colorado, St. Louis, Nashville appear to have those three spots. You get the Jets in there. I mean, the Jets are not guaranteed anything either, but they're certainly, in the mix. Of course, you get Dallas in there. Of course, it's hard to say where things go. It's so far from a guarantee. I don't see them as a threat or a contender. So if you have some pending UFAs that you may not bring back, you're probably better off to get what you can for them, right? So we know that Klingberg is likely going to be a guy that moves. Been linked highly to the Florida Panthers, but we'll see where that goes. But the other big name I want to talk about is Joe Pavelski. I mean, he has had a phenomenal year. The guy couldn't get a contract from the San Jose Sharks a few years ago when he was a UFA there. They didn't want to sign him because of his age. At that point, he would have been, I think, 34, 35. And he got a 3-year deal out of Dallas, and that's paid off extremely well. He's earned every penny that he's been paid by Dallas, for sure. Continues to play at a high rate and produce at a high rate. Like I said, he's aging extremely well. I don't see any reason why he can't extend his playing future a few more years. And the way he's played, he's probably going to be able to demand a multi-year deal again, not just a 1 year. You never know. Maybe he does a 1 year deal and goes chasing a Stanley Cup somewhere, but he's going to be able to command pretty decent money, the same or more than what he's making now. So certainly Pavelski has earned that right. But according to Dan Rosen of NHL.com, he's suggesting on one of his latest columns that the Rangers would be a great fit for him and that they should really be making considerations now. Now, with the Rangers, I do think, like many people agree here, Elliot Friedman's mentioned it numerous times, and I kind of have a gut feeling that he's right, that the Rangers are likely going to do something substantial ahead of the deadline, and I really think it's going to be in the form of a top 6 forward, whether it be Pavelski or JT Miller or, any of the other names, Tyler Toffoli, or any of the other names that we've talked about that are likely moving at the trade deadline. The Rangers are going to get one of them for sure, and Pavelski could be one of those guys. Imagine what that would do to the Rangers' top 6. He's also versatile, right? He can play center if you need him to. You can put him on the wing. He can finish. He can do a lot of things well, and he would really complement the Rangers' current group of top 6 and top 9 guys that really make them that much deeper and stronger and more potent. So, that to me does make a lot of sense, but JT Miller also makes a lot of sense too. Obviously, if you look at what they lost in Sammy Blais, who's certainly, I don't think, in my opinion, the caliber of players that we're talking about them trading for, but he was obviously wanting to be that physical power forward type of guy. JT Miller, to me, fits that model a little bit better. A lot of intangibles there, and we'll see. But the Rangers certainly have some big decisions to make. But Pavelski should be on their radar, according to Dan Rosen, and I don't disagree. Now, when it comes to the Canucks, still and Miller and those guys, reports today from the fourthperiod.com and Dave Pagnotta indicating that there are getting a fair bit of inquiries on Brock Besser as well. We've talked about Miller, we've talked about Garland, we've talked about Pearson, and we did talk about Besser the other day, but that was more of an opinion-based segment where I was saying that based on his upcoming contract qualifying offers and RFA, that we know that they want to create cap space. Rutherford's been very clear about the intent and what they're trying to accomplish, so it makes sense that he would be considered as one of those potential candidates. But certainly, Besser is getting a lot of calls, so I wouldn't rule anything out right now. We don't know what teams are inquiring, but between JT Miller and Brock Besser, Connor Garland, at least one of them, or we can throw Pearson in there too, is likely going to have to move. So based on what the Canucks want to do, if they're not going to be a playoff team, it's possible that something bigger happens. But certainly the fact that Boeser's getting interest is no surprise. Obviously, like I said, the $7.5 million for some teams is not going to scare them off, because there only has to be a one-year deal. Now, of course, you do that, you're putting yourself at risk to lose the player short term. They'd probably prefer a longer-term contract extension if you're going to trade for Boeser. But at the same time, obviously we'll see where that goes, right? But now when it comes to Miller, another note as well that I've seen from Frank Saravalli indicating that if he is traded, he would prefer to play in the United States instead of in Canada, again, because of the COVID protocols. And if things don't change, which surely to God they will, because he has another year in his contract, right? So you'd hope everything would be settled and gone before then when it comes to COVID restrictions. But clearly it seems like, if depending on what things are like, even if he does stay in Vancouver, that he might want to go south of the border when his contract's up regardless. So if you're unsure you're going to keep the guy, and he's obviously, his value is at an all-time high, he's going to give you a ton of assets return, they might have to consider it, even as much as they like the guy, right? You got to look at the future and see what makes the most sense in that regard. And we heard again from Elliotte Friedman that he feels that the Habs defenseman Ben Chiarot is heavily on the Blues radar. So look for St. Louis to be one of the top contending teams to land the physical defenseman. Of course, lots of playoff experience, fits well with the mold. They like to play a big, heavy game in St. Louis on that back end especially, and he would be a good fit there. But certainly, like I mentioned, there's numerous teams looking to add some top defensemen here, whether it be Toronto, Florida, Carolina. They're all in the mix, but they're all kind of having a little bit of a different type of player that they're looking for. So ultimately, it's going to depend. But Chiarot in St. Louis does make a lot of sense, and we'll see if Friedman's on to something with that one. But that is all your news and rumors for today. Let me know your thoughts on everything discussed down below in the comments. We will discuss further. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We will keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.